Donna Druchunas, and this is a get-together for Sequential Artist Workshop, aka SAW, where we talk about Procreate and other related things. So, without further ado, I'm going to pin my spotlight, my iPad for everyone. So that should be big for you, and you can make it full screen because we're going to be looking at that more than anything else. There's no reason to look at me. I'm boring. Okay. So I have three things that we're going to do today. The first one's a Q&A. I want to do a Q&A every week if we can. So if you have questions during the week and you don't need an immediate answer, I will keep track of those and I'll let you know if I'm going to put it in the video. And then we're going to do that first. I have a question from Erla that we're gonna go over together. Then we're gonna do a real quick review of the layers in a traditional comics Procreate file. I do mine partly that way and partly a different way. So we'll get into that again in the future. But I just want to go over real quick because I found a really nice sample that you guys might want to look up and get for your own library. And then we're going to go over the inking brushes in Procreate and some cool settings that you can use to adjust any of them to your own style of drawing. Okay, so Q&A is about transparent background. So Erla sent me this file. I'm going to open it in Procreate, and she wants to know about how would she get this hand in? This hand and phone was in another Procreate document. And when she copied it in here, the background wasn't transparent. And so she had to make a kludge so that this map would show in the screen of the phone and in the background of that. So I'm going to just show you in the layers what she has, the pertinent layers. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to go to the background color and I'm going to change it to some other color. Doesn't really matter what, but did you see as soon as I did that, some stuff showed up blue, and I changed my background to blue. So in those spots, the background is coming through. So the layers that are there have transparency or nothing in those areas. The reason I want to do that is I wanted to show you the phone image, and you can see it's a rectangle that was added from a different document, and it's got a solid background. So what Erla did, which is one way to do this, but a little bit of extra work, is she took part of the map and cut and pasted it inside the phone screen. And she took another part of the map, not sure where that layer is, there, and posted it into the rectangle around the screen. All to get it to look like the screen of the phone and the background around the hand was transparent. So we'll go back to all the way to the beginning, undo everything. And this is what we want it to look like. But instead of pasting that in, why not have it just show through transparent areas? So, so first thing that we want to do is go back to having a different background color. And then look at the map layer alone. So if you hold down the N or whatever letter that is, the little checkbox next to it on the layer, it will show only that layer. And if you hold it down again, it brings back the other layers that were visible. So looking at the background layer, we can see that this background layer has some areas that are transparent. So they were erased somehow, completely or partially, whatever, probably by accident. I know I draw on the wrong layers and erase stuff on the wrong layers sometimes. So, so that's part of something I went ahead and fixed for our demo. So I just made a version of the layer. Now I still have a little thing right there, but I got rid of most of the background showing through, and I can pick this color I set this up. I like this little dot to bring up the color picker. So I set that up that way. All these things are programmable, and I think maybe next week we'll have a lesson on like programming the interface and changing the way the features work. But whoops, says I'm on a hidden layer, so I'm going to open my layers. I'm going to go to my layer map fixed that I made, and I'm just going to color in. I have a nice solid brush. Color in those couple of little dots where the pink was still showing through. So now I have a nice background to work with. To put that phone in and see how that works. And all I did to fix this was kind of what I just did, is I went in and I filled the colors area that were pink with either white or gray to finish the map. Okay. So that's one reason that if you have a layer how you want it, like that map, and you don't want to mess it up, lock it. Lock the layer. And if you want to work on it, but you really like the one you did, lock that layer, make a duplicate and work on the duplicate. I'm like a big fan of having multiple copies of everything. So if I mess up one really badly, I can still go back to the one before, because I mess up a lot. Okay, so here's what Erla drew for the hand, and she's got a bunch of layers in here. And this is kind of what my files usually look like while I'm working. I don't, I'm not as organized as I'm working. Every now and then I go through and organize my layers and rename them. But while I'm working, I just make stuff. So first thing I'm going to do is like before, is I'm going to go through and change the background color. Oh, so that is the transparent one. Now, why is that? Why is that? That when Erla copied that into Procreate, it was solid, because most of the background on this is transparent. That is, when you change the background color, you can see that, whoops, yeah, that's where you do it. You can see through most of this area. Okay, there's a few white spots that we wouldn't want to have there. But so the reason is that when the background is on, and we'll just set it to white again, when the background is on, and you export this file as a PNG or a JPEG, or even if you go into your wrench tool and say add and copy canvas, because you can copy this whole, everything you see, canvas is what you see. So if I copy this canvas, it's copying everything I see to the clipboard. And I can paste it in the other document. So let's do that now. Copy canvas. And I'm going to go back to the other document. And 3-finger swipe down will bring up the menu for you guys with copy and paste stuff, but I change it to 4-finger tap because I like that better. And I paste that phone in, and you can see it's opaque. Okay, so we'll just leave that there. Let's go back to the phone document. And turn the background off. Now, if we export this to a PNG, or we copy the canvas, it will not have the filled in background. If you export it to a JPEG, it will still have the filled in background, because JPEG does not support having no background or any transparent areas. So if I copy this now, the map will show through. However, again, we made some little mistakes working on the layers, working on the wrong layer. And so here, instead of erasing something, I guess Erla painted white over it, because the background was white, and you can't really tell if you did that wrong. So I would suggest, if you are working on something that you want the background to be transparent, either check down here on the background, either check the box to turn the background off, or if you want to leave the background on for some reason, change it to another color so it's easy to see and you won't actually draw on it instead of erasing. White is really hard to remember. White is really hard to remember that you are, it's not transparent, right? It's not transparent if it's white. Okay, so here is Earla's phone. Again, I went in and I made a new, I erased the white and stuff. So here's my little version of the phone where I left the layers as they were, but I just got rid of the little white. So I've got them and I've got my background off. Now, if I go into copy canvas, or if I go into share and save this as a PNG into my photos, there will be no background. So we're going to go back to the gallery. Then you go back into the map. You can do your three finger swipe to bring this up, and I'm going to paste it, and you can see we have the phone without the background. Now, I didn't bring in these other layers with it that Earla wants, but I could have left those turned on as well, which is text in these little icons. But my main thing I wanted to show you is that that's how you get it without the background. If you've already drawn something in another document, and I do this a lot, I draw my characters sometimes in a separate document, and then I paste them into my page with my panels. So you want to make sure your background is off, and either you use copy canvas or save it as a PNG so that the background will be transparent. And that would have worked with the text as well. The only thing, reason I did not bring the text in is if you copy and paste a text layer in Procreate, it's not text anymore. It will do it, but it turns it into a just a drawing layer. So here I'm going to turn these phones off that I have, and I just want to prove this to you that that's what happens. Here's a layer in this document that has text in it, and I can click on that layer and say edit text, and the text editor comes up and everything. So it's definitely text. And if I go up here to this layer and duplicate it, I just learned something. If you duplicate it, it's still text, because I can go in and edit the text on the new layer. But if I use the selection tool and copy it and paste it, copy, paste, see, this one is not text. See, it doesn't have the A in it for text. So I just learned something that's really cool. If you need to make a copy of a text layer, duplicate it. Don't copy and paste it, because if you so you can't copy and paste from one document to another, because there's no way to duplicate a layer into another file. So so if you want to copy and paste text from one file to another, you have to actually go into the edit text, pick the select all, copy it, and then add a new text layer. That's kind of a different issue, but text layers work different, so differently than image layers. Anyway, that's all I wanted to show you. Earla, did that answer your questions?
Yes, it did.
Super. So yeah, I hope that'll save you some time.
Exactly. And, you know, I knew it was something like that, the JPEG, and yeah, it was perfect. Yes. Well, thanks very much, Donna.
You're welcome. I just never realized how much background and knowledge I have about computer graphics, like transparency and stuff, from working on the technical side of it in a software company for many years. So that's come in really handy for me to be able to get up to speed quickly on Procreate. I got to skip a lot of learning curve stuff that most of you probably are going through because there's a lot of technical things that I have that are the same as or similar to Photoshop and Corel Paint and this and that and the other thing, but not exactly the same. Okay, so I just want to show you this thing I found with the how we little like 2 to 5 minute review of the layers that people a lot of people set up in a traditional comic. Now this is from Eric Merced, Merced. And I found it on Gumroad or something. He's obviously a comics creator, and he has this sample that you can get from him. I think I paid $5 or $6 for it. It wasn't free, but to me it was worth it. And it was really fun because I found out he did it pretty much the same way that I showed you last time. So here's all his layers. He's got the panels, kind of like what we did. And he has an extra thing in his panel. So he has a layer called frames, and then he has a layer called gutter mask. But basically what he did is everything outside the panel borders, he just filled with white. I don't usually do that, but it's kind of cool because then if you draw something and you go outside the line of the panel borders, it's covered by that white. That's one way to do that. But that's the panels is kind of what we did. We just drew boxes and I put them at the top of the layers. So we'll go down to the bottom and start and look at all the layers that he's got. First is his sketch, and that's not with the panels. He just had some lines drawn where he wanted to put the panels. That is a super nice sketch. Mine's never that nice, but he has the sketch. And then above it, you'll see a light and sketch layer. He has it called light and sketch, and it's filled with the color. Can be any color, gray, red, whatever. I like this blue because it's like the non-photo blue pencil. You turn on that layer, it's set with the little letter here, it's set to screen mode. And that makes the sketch lighter so that you can draw on top of it. So then on top of that, he's got his pencils layer. You can still see the sketch behind the pencils, but it's faded out so you can draw. It's kind of like drawing on tracing paper in the real world. And then he's got another lightened pencils layer above that. When I go, say I'm going to do my inking now, I had a sketch, pencils, inking. I'll turn the sketch layer off. So all I see is my pencils layer, and it's lightened with the screen layer. And then I can do my inking on top of it. And then he's got some text and the panels. So I wanted to show you that. I will post a link in the Mighty Network for any of you who want to look at this and other things that Eric Merced has. It's just a nice little reference. Of course, I create this myself in my files, but I really like seeing that someone else does it the same way. Sometimes when I take a class or find something like that, it's really nice to learn that someone else does something the same way you do, and that it legitimizes your own knowledge, I guess. Okay. Any questions about that?
Donna,
Okay.
I had one. When do you think he puts in his, he has his text, but when does he draw his bubbles, his speech bubbles?
Probably well, I don't know what he does. A lot of people draw their speech bubbles or at least pencil in where they're going to go as they're drawing the panels so that they know they'll fit. They'll pencil in actually the text into the drawing so they know it will fit. In fact, I do that in Procreate. In Procreate, if I'm working on a document and I have this panel. Guess I need a different brush for that. I have this panel and I want to draw people doing something and, make sure that the stuff will fit. I actually write out the little words in there and put a stupid speech bubble. I put that on a separate layer. I don't do my speech bubbles in Procreate, but I still put it in my sketches and pencils to make sure that I'm not gonna have the people filling the whole frame and the words won't fit. I do my actual speech bubbles the very last thing in my comics.
So Donna, because I think you and Beth both do your text outside of Procreate, if I remember correctly. Do you just do a good estimate and like draw your text, like hand letter it just to give you an approximation of size?
Yeah, that's what I do. That's what I do.
I type mine in Procreate now that it has a text tool.
Yeah,
Okay.
I actually do use Procreate for my text now.
Oh, you're not doing it outside in InDesign or something else anymore,
Nope.
Beth?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay. You don't have to. It comes out okay. It comes out fine. I like to do it in something else because I like my speech balloons and my text to be vector graphics because I think when you print it, it looks just a tiny bit sharper. Maybe most people wouldn't even notice that because you're making, all of this high resolution and it doesn't look blurry or messy. If you do it all in Procreate, it looks fine. So it's just probably a little quirk that I have about when I print my stuff. I just like the text. I think it's a little sharper when I do it in the other app. I use Affinity Publisher. But there's no reason you have to. You don't have to use another app. You can create a whole comic and files that you send to a printer in Procreate. And we'll be talking about different ways to export a comic to print in a few weeks. I hope in a few weeks or eventually. This is a test I did of a bunch of the brushes in the inking folder that comes with Procreate. In the brushes, when you click on the little brush, you see all these. The ones for Procreate have a little icon on it, like an A for calligraphy or a fountain pen nib for inking. And these ones with a little squiggle, like a Procreate logo, I guess it's supposed to be. Those are groups of brushes that I made or imported that I got from a class or something. So what I did here, these are all just the inking brushes that were in Procreate. And I wanted to try them all out. And I was deciding what kind of panels I wanted. So I just drew and held and made little rectangle sort of polygon shapes with it, so I could see what the different brushes looked like. And I made some of them thicker and thinner just to see what they would look like. And that's a good way to just try them out. Just try out all the brushes as they are and draw something with them. I did this to figure out how I wanted to do my panels, and I ended up liking this. This is the Inca brush. I ended up liking that for my panels because I like the roughness of it and the way it worked. But you might want a really smooth one or whatever. So this is worth doing. Actually, it's worth doing with all the brushes. It's like to take one page and try all the brushes in a folder and just see what they do. And I did that in the order they were in the folder. So if I ever wanted to go back, I could look at them. I also do stuff like this. I was practicing drawing eyes. I wanted to try all different kind of eyes. So I actually have a bunch of layers of eyes in here, and I just did them with all different brushes. This is like a pencil brush. This is like a fat ink brush. You can just try all different kinds of brushes. I even was painting some with some watercolor brushes. So you can combine two things, like learning the brushes of Procreate and practicing something that you want to practice, like figure drawing or drawing eyes or mouths or whatever it is. So it's kind of like just having a sketchbook or scrap paper where you do all that stuff, but I keep it. This is another one I did. I got a set of brushes called Pandem Ink that Abby Nurse put out for free during the pandemic. And so I scribbled with them all, and I decided that this one here, it's the same as this. I love it for drawing trees. So like this is now my tree drawing brush. But I tried out these brushes. I love really messy textury brushes. So I wanted this set. But the only one I ended up using is this one called Skadoosh or something. And I drew all my trees with it now because it's so much fun. So just playing with a set of brushes. Super worth your time. Yeah, Google Abby Nurse, Beth says. And she said she just downloaded the pandemic ones yesterday. So they're still free. So you can go check those out. Okay. Yeah. And there's all kinds of brushes. And you can get carried away, as you noticed I have. I have like a ton of brushes. I put the ones that I use all the time in one folder, my own folder. I made a copy of them because I don't want to go scrolling through all this every time I am working on something. So most of those are for playing. And then the ones I use are in my main folder. It's named after my project, or you could just call it favorites. And I wanted to show you, when you rename a folder, like here, I can rename a folder of brushes. You can use emoticons in the text that you rename it. So you can paste in a heart or a smiley face or whatever, which will make it easier to find like your favorite brushes or brush folders, because they have that bright color icon and it stands out when you're scrolling up and down. All right, so back to inking. Okay, so this is a document. This is what I want to show you, some things for playing with inking. And this layer here is a dog that I am working on that I inked with three different brushes. This is the dry ink that I usually use. And I, instead of drawing just smooth lines, I made the outline more sketchy. I don't usually do my inking like that, but I thought, well, it'd be fun to try. So instead of, taking my dry ink brush that I made a copy in my main folder so I can always find it, and just drawing the ear all in one swoop, or changing the size and drawing the ear all in one swoop, I went like that and like that. And here you can see I did like that. So I made it more sketchy. So that was a fun thing to do, just to try my favorite brush in a different way. This is a super cool brush. If you like, it comes with Procreate. It's called Syrup. If you like brushes and nib pen style inking, this is so easy to make these beautiful lines that have the thick and thins, and it just does it by itself. So the Syrup, there's a couple other brushes like that too in the inking brushes. So if you like that style, that's one that's really cool. And then the monoline brush is one that is just a monoline. It's like those marking pens that are sort of technical pens. It doesn't get thicker or thinner. It doesn't change transparency. It doesn't do anything. It just makes a totally consistent line. Okay, so that's just showing you, if you're new to Procreate, you're new to making comics in Procreate, if there was something that you wanted to do, I could never do this. I could never do this with a real pen. Never, ever. And I'll show you some reasons why. Now, I do have pens that I can press harder and the lines get thicker and so forth, but I could never do this because I could never make the lines smooth enough and just flowing. And I can, I could see that if I wanted to, I could end up drawing comics like this in Procreate. All right, so let's just look at this layer. Have some notes. So the thing that I think is tips for inking in Procreate is you want to be able to keep it loose and make quick strokes. If your line goes somewhere you don't want it, you can erase it. So that's like a huge benefit over inking on paper, right? Because you can just erase it if it goes too far or something. The reason I say quick strokes is because when I go like that, I get this nice line. And if I go slow and try to be very precise, my line gets sloppier. The slower I go, the sloppier my line gets. I can't say that that's true for everyone, but I imagine it probably is, because when you do it quickly, it just straightens out. It just, your arm makes a smoother motion. Also, using your whole arm from the elbow or even the shoulder. So I'm not just going like this. When I try to draw really, really carefully, I end up just moving my fingers rather than moving my wrist or my shoulder. And that makes the lines messier. But Procreate has a really cool feature. So one of the things I want to show you in the brushes that helps with that. It helps more when you're drawing faster, but it helps with everything. So let's look at my drying brush. So if you want to look at the settings in a brush and you want to go beyond what's on the little left menu of changing the size and the opacity, you open the thing to see the brush, you click on the brush so it's highlighted, and then you click on it again, and this brush studio opens. Okay. So I'm going to make a copy of my dry ink because I don't want to mess up my original one. So I swiped to the left and hit duplicate, and that made a copy of it, and it adds a 1 to the end of it. So you'll have dry ink 1, or you can change the name of the brush in this brush studio at the very bottom thing. And if you want to, nope, sorry. You change the name of the brush just in the brush thing. We won't look at the name of the brush till later. At any rate, I made a copy of the brush. I'm going to open it, and I'm going to look at this first set. It opens up with stroke path highlighted, and there's a thing called streamline on here, and you can control this. If you turn it all the way down, the brush will draw exactly what you draw, with all shakiness in your hand or whatever. So you can see here, I got a smoother line going fast, but it's still got a little wonkiness in it. If you turn streamline all the way up, oh look, it just cleaned up my lines that I had already drawn. As I'm drawing, it smooths out the line, which a lot of times is nice. And you can set it anywhere in between for the amount of streamlining you want, for how much the brush will smooth out your lines as you draw. Okay, I'm going to clear my drawing pad so I can show you something else. That's the problem for me. If streamlining is too hard and I try to write, it tries to smooth out my letters too much, and you have to go really slower on the writing if you want to not have it smooth out your lines. So I find streamlining down in the first 20% is better for writing. And if I want my lines for drawing smoothed out a lot, I'll turn streamlining up in maybe even up to 80%. I don't know that I've ever turned it all the way up. So this is really a feature that you want to play with, the streamlining, because that will help you with the smoothness of your lines. Another thing you can play with is the next one down on the Brush Studio menu is taper. And that is how the beginning and end of the stroke. So I'm using a consistent pressure on this, and it's still getting smaller at the tips. And so you can play with this. You can see it's getting smaller on one side. Down here, it's really sharp. And up here, it's narrower than the middle, but not as pointy. And you can see up here that one tip is more pointy than the other. You can click link tip sizes, so it's the same on both. And you can mess around with the pressure sensitivity in here as well. There's other places you can play with that too. If you do not have the Apple Pencil, you want to be using the playing with the properties on the bottom for the pressure and the tips for the beginning and ends of the lines, and that works a little differently. So you'll have to just play with it with your other stylus. This bottom one also works for your finger. The top one is only how it works with the Apple Pencil. Okay, so there's other things in here that we won't get into how to change them, but the things that make your pencils work, brushes work the way they do are the shape and the grain. So this brush that I'm playing with here is that dry ink, and it's kind of scratchy. And that's because the shape of the brush is a rough, and it has this thing called grain that makes when you draw not completely solid. It's not a really smooth shape and grain. I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to go into syrup, and I'm going to show you the shape. Okay, see, it's still not a circle or a square, but it's much smoother. It looks like a guitar pick. And there's no grain. So this is a much sharper, smoother brush. It has the streamline set higher initially, but you can change that however you want. It has the taper set more extreme, and the same at the beginning and the end of the stroke. So these are all things you can play with. Again, I recommend making a copy of the brush first, duplicating it before you do that. All right, so there's a whole bunch of other things in here that we won't get into that are maybe more to do with painting. If you're making brushes for painting, like rendering, wet mix, color dynamics, we talked about that a little bit before. If you want your brush to change colors as you go, dynamics. I wanted to just go to the Apple Pencil yet. You can, if you're using an Apple Pencil, you can adjust how the brush interacts with the Apple pressure. So here's another way you can change the pressure sensitivity of this one brush. I'm going to go up here and clear my drawing pad again. Okay, I can change this so it only, see, it's not getting so tiny at the beginning and the end. It's only changing a little bit. When I have the pressure sensitivity all the way up, I can get really thin at the beginning and really thick in the middle. So I can adjust how pressure sensitive it is. I can even make it backwards, where it's thicker on the ends and thin in the middle, by putting it to the left below the 0 mark. So I'm going to leave this way up because I think that's where it was. Anyway, this is my copy of this brush. So if I mess it up, I can always go back to the original. You can change opacity settings. How does the opacity change with the brush pressure? And flow and bleed are used more for painting brushes if you're laying down watercolor, or you want to make, if you go into gouache brushes and things like that. And then the last thing that you can change is, how is the tilt affected? Let me show you what tilt does. I'm going to go back to this dry ink brush because it has a more obvious tilt. So this is still in the Apple Pencil section on the Brush Studio. Then look at the tilt. If I hold this pencil straight up, it makes a dark line. And if I go on the side with my Apple Pencil, it makes a kind of blurry, shaded line. And that's set here in the Apple Pencil. This first thing here tells you how much you have to tilt your Apple Pencil before it starts doing the shading. And you can change that to make it more or less, just play around with it as you like. I don't usually mess with that much. Personally, I just tilt my brush and see how far I have to tilt it to get what I want. And different brushes work differently, and you'll notice this is higher or lower on them. So here, the tilt affects the opacity a lot. So mine goes almost invisible when it's very, very light. It does gradation, so it's getting darker to lighter. It bleeds and changes the size, does all kinds of things. So that's another thing you can change on brushes if you want to change how the brush works if you tilt it. So just a quick review. We went over the stroke path, streamlining, right? If you want to make your brush smoother or less smooth, means does exactly what you draw without smoothing it out. Look at, I'll clear this. I'm going to draw one again with that no streamlining. If I turn streamlining on, it smooths it way out. And it does that as you draw. So if you're trying to draw something that's really squiggly and you notice that your pen just isn't doing what you want, it's like not going where you want because you're trying to draw fast and squiggly lines. I find this like with curly hair, or curly hair is where I find it a lot. But anytime you're trying to do a real squiggly thing like this and it's not doing it, it's because the streamline is turned up. So anytime you feel like your pen is like forcing your shape, your lines to be a certain way, check the streamlining on that brush and you can turn that up and down. Okay, the taper you can play with, it just changes how thin it is at the beginning and end. We're not going to play with the shape and grain now, but if you can look at them when you're looking at brushes to get an idea of how that affects. Rendering and wet mix is mostly for brushes for painting. So when we get into color, we'll probably look at some of that a little bit because we can, do flat coloring for comics. We can do watercolor, we can do gouache, all kinds of things. Color dynamics, if you change these things, every time you draw a line, it'll be slightly different color. So this is good if you're drawing leaves and stuff like that. And I did cover it in the first video a little bit, I think. Okay, Apple Pencil gives you control. And then this is one last one that is really interesting. This is just your basic brush, they call it properties. I don't mess with the top ones for regular brushes much. I use this top part if I'm making a stamp brush, like I want to draw the same bird 20 times, and you can make a brush like that. And then you can go like that and 20 birds. We'll talk about that in a separate time. We're talking about brushes for inking. So you see that your brush has a minimum size and a maximum size, and a minimum opacity and a maximum opacity. So those affect when you're not in the brush menu, those affect what happens to your brush when you move the size scaler and the opacity scaler. So on this brush, it said opacity can go to 0. Oh, look, it disappeared. And up to 100%. So I can set the opacity of this brush from anywhere between 0 and 100%. And the size can go down to like really thin. I don't even know if you can see that line. To not hugely thick. That's the maximum size I can make it. And if we go back into the brush setting properties, we'll see that the maximum size is only set at 27%. If I wanted to use this brush and draw mega, fatter lines, I could drag this up so that it's allowing me to make different sizes. So it was on 27%, but if I drag it all the way up, it goes to 97%. Now that's 27% and 97% of what? And that goes back to the shape. This shape is imported from an image, and it's 97% or 27% of the size of the number of pixels in that image. You don't have to worry about that so much using the brushes, but that's where that comes from. So if your brush is made to be used as a detail brush and small, and it has a small image there, even if you go into properties and set the maximum size all the way up, it's only going to get so big because your shape is only so big. But you can change this. Now when I go, I save that, I click done. Look on my original one showing it only getting that big. Here, the preview is bigger, fatter, showing me that I can make a fatter line. And when I go here to size my brushes, you'll notice I can go all the way up to that fat line here that I couldn't do before. So that are just some things that I wanted to show you in the brush studio. So remember, you open the brushes, you swipe the one you want to mess around with to the left and hit duplicate, and then you go to the new one and mess up the new one. when it's highlighted and you click it again, it opens this brush studio and you can go through and mess around with whatever you want. The ones I think are most useful for inking, again, is the streamline and taper. And then probably the Apple Pencil features. And then the properties, if I want to change how big, if it doesn't have the settings I want for how big it can get, or if it doesn't let me make it as opaque or transparent as I want. So those are what I use the most for messing around with inking brush. Jitter, Deb, is real interesting. Deb said in the chat, what is jitter? So we'll look at this brush. I'm not sure if it'll work. Go up to the stroke path and we see jitter. It's how much the little point of the pen moves around like by itself. See, if I turn it way up, it's like the point of the pen is jumping all over the page. So if you want your smooth brush to be less smooth, you can try putting up the jitter. It has weird effects, but that's what it does. So you can actually take this brush, which is an inking brush, and turn it into like a texture brush if you want by using the jitter. It changes the whole style of that. And you'll find that jitter can be changed. This is the general jitter for it. And then there's other little minor adjustments you can make to jitter in other places. Yeah, I see a couple other people do the same thing, creating a set of brushes using for the current project. And yeah, that's really handy to keep the brushes you use a lot in one place, so you don't have to search for them all the time. Also, you can then, you've made a copy of them, put them in the new folder. So let me show you how to do that. Okay. So say I wanted to make a new folder of brushes in the brush library. So when I click the brush, this brush library comes up. It doesn't show up right away, but if you pull it down, there's a plus and you can add a new brush set. And then you can call it whatever you want. Blah, blah. I don't care what it calls it. So called it anyway, I made that new brush set. And remember, you can rename it. You can even put emoticons in the name so that you can find it more easily later. So now I go into this brush, some other brush folder, and I have this thing of flowers, and I want to make it's going to be a lot of flowers in my next comic. So I duplicated that brush. Whoops. Select the brush, slide it to the left, duplicate it. Then I can drag it up to that folder, hold it down till the folder opens, and then drop it in the folder. You can't just drop it on the name of the folder, because you just saw that I tried to do that and it didn't work. And now it goes in there. So now I have a version of this flower one in my new folder. And you can do that, as many as you want. So when you find your favorites or ones you keep coming back to a lot, you might want to make a folder for those. And then, yeah, if you're making a series of comics, even if it's just for, Instagram, diary comics, and you want to have consistency in your brushes, and not have to search all over for them, save them in a special folder. So that's all I have from my demo for today. Just a little review of that. Beth wants to know how to make stamp brushes. Yes, we will go over that because I love stamp brushes, and it's really super easy, super easy, making stamp brushes. I'll show you some that I made. Let's see. I made all these stamp brushes here. So what makes it a stamp brush is that when I have my iPad set, so I can't draw with my, oh no, I don't. You can turn it on so you can't draw with your finger. And what did I do there? I switched to eraser by accident. Okay, so I have the stamp brush of these frogs. So you can make them so they change size by themselves in orientation, or they don't. And I made all these stamp brushes for my projects that I'm working on. So yes, I will show you guys how to make stamp brushes, because it's really, really easy. Okay, so that's it. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap it up?
I have a comment.
Yeah,
You are awesome.
thank you.
I have learned so much in the past few videos when I'm not here live that I'm in awe, Donna.
Oh, thank you. I love Procreate, and I love teaching people how to do stuff that I know how to do. That's why I do knitting classes and stuff too. It's like one of my joys in life. So I'm like more than happy to help you guys with this. Erla has a raised hand.
Yeah, I wanted to confirm, when you make a brush, when you figure out all the attributes for your project, you have to, and if you get out of it, you have to go back, or you're going to do another project, you have to have it, you have to just take notes of the size of brush, the opacity, because you can't lock a brush
You can.
attribute.
You can sort of lock, not really lock a brush. That's a good question. So I remember I said when I'm doing the brushes, I always make a copy of it first. Because then I have the original, so I don't have to like revert to save or find and make back the old version. But you can go into a brush, and if you go all the way into Brush Studio to the bottom and about this brush, there's a thing that says create new reset point and reset brush. So I had set that for the dry ink one. So I had a reset point on 12/20/20. So I had gone into this brush on December 20th, and I hit create new reset point. And now I want to reset the brush. I can click that, and it probably undid everything. But I'm not sure exactly. Reset. Yeah, see, it went back to skinny when I go done. That brush isn't fat anymore. So everything I did today, it undid it because I had created a reset point. Does that answer you?
We can't hear you, Erla.
Where exactly was that
When you go into the brush, Brush Studio, it's the one all the way on the bottom about this brush.
okay, gotcha.
Create new reset point, and then you can
Okay.
reset the brush later.
Okay.
I'm always
Okay.
worried that I'm going to forget to create a new reset point when I mess around with the brush. That's why I make a duplicate of the brush. But this
Great.
gives you that ability to be able to go backwards. And yes, it
Okay.
is super important to take notes. Beth has this in the chat. Super important to take notes. And you can make a layer in your file or use paper, whatever. I think the easiest way is to just make an extra layer in your document, and you can take notes about what brush you used, what percentage size you have it set to, and opacity or anything else that you want, so that you can duplicate it in the future if you take a break from your project or whatever. So yeah. Because sometimes it's really hard to go back to like exactly how fat did I have that brush. I wanted to redraw just the hand on that character, and now I can't make the brush the same thickness that it was when I drew the rest of the character. So yeah. So especially if you can care about consistency a lot, you want to write that stuff down. And the best place to save it is on a layer in your document. Then you can make that layer invisible, and it's there forever. Yeah.
So when you do that, and then, so I use different files or different canvases for each page. So then do you just copy that layer of your notes forward from page to page?
Well, what I do, yeah. And what I would do is when I'm starting a new project, like, this is the current one I'm working on. This is my current project that I'm working on. I have a template that I use. It's kind of like what I showed you earlier in the previous video that has like guides that help me draw my panels and stuff. And I would put it in this file. And then every time I duplicate this to start a new page, it's in there with my panel guides and everything else. You can even put a color palette. You know, you have a color palette here, and I have one. This is the one, and I named it Hill of Witches. It matches my brush, Hill of Witches. I made that palette here, but you could even screen capture it and paste it in there, or, you know, pick the colors and draw them in there and just have a little color palette. You know, you can put anything that you want to remember or have in every one you could have in there. It could have a sample of your text and everything. So yeah, so that's anything you want in that. I would make in that template page, and then every time I create, so I don't go like into this plus and create a new canvas out of this every time when I'm working on a comic. I made it once, then I put in all my stuff I want, and I just left swipe and duplicate it every time I want to create a new page instead of using this. Because if you use this, there's nothing in it. It's just, it's the size you want and everything, but there's nothing in it. And when I duplicate this, I have my panels, anything I want to have in every page of that as a reference. Yeah.
Since I tend to, I don't know, solve a problem in page 2 that I didn't have in page 1, I just keep all my notes in Notability, which you can put on as a slide over on top of it. So I, move it to the side when I don't need it, but then when I need it, I refer back to it, and then I can add it there. And I'm always running out of layers. So sometimes I'm looking forward to seeing about how you all manage lots of layers.
Yeah. When we get to the coloring, and the way I do it with coloring, I end up with a lot of layers. So we'll definitely be talking about managing layers when we get to there. I don't, in this traditional technique where you're doing the black and white comics, like this guy Eric Merced does, you don't run out of layers because you use like 6 layers. But I know that most of us, when we start using Procreate, we might start this way, but then we end up saying, oh, I'm going to put this on another layer, because then if I mess up that, I don't have to redraw this, so we'll definitely get into that, because I think using more layers is smarter in Procreate. It's one of the benefits of working digitally. It's almost like silly to me to draw all your ink on one layer and do it digitally, except you can erase and undo. So there is that benefit, but Beth says doing your text in another program it saves layers too, because every piece of text has to be a separate layer in Procreate. So
I just have this weird thing of, like when I watch a stranger who does the video, I don't know, it just doesn't stick. But when I watch someone I know, because I feel like I know you now, Donna, it's like,
cool.
Because Donna can do it, I think I can do it. Whereas Abby Nurse, I like her a lot, and Bridget Bardot, I like them a lot, but I don't trust them as much as I trust you.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice to hear. But Abby Nurse, I haven't watched her tutorials, but Lisa Bardot's tutorials are really good. I learned a lot from her. And I have a couple favorite teachers on Skillshare that I learned a lot from that don't do comics. I just like the way they do stuff. In fact, I'll be showing you some tricks I learned from the Art Mother on Skillshare.
That's what I was going to ask, Donna. Who do you
Art
like
Mother,
on Skillshare?
Liz Kohler Brown.
Yeah.
I love Art Mother.
Art Mother.
Yeah, those are 2 that come immediately to mind. I watch like everything they do.
So I don't know if you know that Eric Merced died.
I wasn't sure. I saw
something.
I saw an obituary when I searched for his name, but I didn't know if it was him or someone with the same name. Oh, that's so
what
sad.
happened?
I think
awesome.
his parents posted that he lost, I think, a 4-year battle with cancer.
Oh,
And I just went out because I think you'd referred to something, and so you can still buy his things, and so I hope that goes in.
does it go to his parents? I hope so. Or
his estate? Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, man, he's been one of the people I most learned from in
I know,
comics.
he was
Probably
so
4 or 5 years.
so
generous.
simple.
Yeah.
You know, he made things easier.
Yeah.
Before they got real
Ah.
complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was so generous with sharing his stuff that he knew how to do. That's so sad.
Yeah.
So it's a testament to don't put off, right? Do today.
Yeah, really. You never know, right?
Mhm.
I always think of Anton, what's his name? The kid that was in Star Trek. Oh my God. And he was in the new Star Trek movies, and he was getting the mail and a truck rolled down the hill and killed him.
Yeah.
You know, he's like 26 years old or something. So never put off for tomorrow what you can do today. Yeah.
So if we have questions that we'd like to get into the queue for discussion, we should put them over in the Procreate thread, and then
Yeah, put them in the Procreate thread. If you have any questions, I mean, if they're super easy, I might just answer them right there. But if they're super hard, I might point you to another tutorial on it, or say we're going to do it in the future. Beth and I were talking about creating those templates with the bleed lines and all that, and that's a little too complicated for right now. We will get to that probably before the end of this year, but I'm just not ready to go there yet. But yeah, and then I will answer them all one way or another. But if they're like Erla's and it's a nice thing that is good for demonstrating, I'll do it in the next video.
Yeah. Thanks again, Donna. That was great. Yeah.
Thank you all
I
for
actually-
coming.
Yeah, it was good. Thanks so much.
Okay, any last questions, or are we going to say goodbye now?
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you for coming, Ashish, and everyone
you.
else I didn't mention or see. I'll see you in the Mighty Network and in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much. Just
Take
great.
care.
Great job.
Bye.
See you, everybody.